I wanted to kind of begin in a way that I often begin, which is asking about comics in general, how you found them, and what comics allow you to do as a storyteller.
Um, Comics in general, as you might know, I come from Egypt,
Hmm.
which is a country where comics culture is not as big as the United States, for instance, or the United Kingdom. There are comics, and it comes in kind of waves. Like something gets very popular, so you get comics and you get access to it, and then it kind of dies down, and so it's not as consistent as in the US, for instance. We don't have comic shops. We've only started having comics festivals or cons very recently. I'm a child of the 90s, so my first I first got through comics. First of all, there is an Egyptian magazine called Mickey, which is basically the Disney magazine. This has got stories with Donald Duck and Scrooge and things like that. And this is the biggest selling comic in Egypt ever and the longest running. So I'd
Hmm.
say that this was how I got into comics in general. But when it comes to mainstream American comics, I think the Batman the Animated Series
Hmm.
show and Batman Adventures. I was lucky enough to we were lucky enough in the 90s to have translations of that, licensed translations published by a big publisher in Egypt. I used to collect these, and they were kind of a gateway into the more broad mainstream American comics, and
Hmm.
they were a huge influence on me artistically as well, which it will is a question that's going to come later. But
Hmm.
yeah, um, and this was the and I was this was around the same time the death of Superman was getting a lot of publicity. I remember it being covered in Egyptian newspapers. You know, Superman's dead. That's a huge thing for everyone in the world,
Yeah, yeah.
and it kind of got my interest to start checking what's happening, what this is all about. And yeah, from there I got hooked on comics. Basically, I started reading and I never looked back. And it also this was around the same time I started uh, wanting to draw comics. I think as every kid, you start reading them and then you start wanting to tell your own stories in the same format because it's
Hmm.
it's easy. It's not like making a movie or even learning an instrument and writing a song. You just a piece of paper and a pencil, and you can draw your own stories. And I think this leads to the other part of the question: what does comics allow me as a person to do? It's uh, it's because of the simplicity of the medium. Anyone can make comics. Anyone can pick up a pencil or a tablet and start telling their own stories in a visual format that is easy to access by anyone. You know, kids read comics and they can understand them. Grown-ups read comics and they can understand them. So it's a very accessible medium that is easy to use to create as much as it is easy to understand. And also, there's a lot of creative control that comes with comics. I'm also a big fan of films, and I actually
Hmm.
worked as an editor for a film section for a magazine during my college years. So I was also very interested in the medium of film.
Hmm.
But I think with comics, it's probably the only medium, the only visual medium comparable to things like movies and short films and stuff that you have the most creative control because as an artist, you're the director and the actor and DP, you're doing everything. Uh, so you have more creative control on how you tell the story than anywhere else. Um, and and yeah, I mean, there's always a part of me in everything all the comics I make, whether I'm writing and drawing them, or whether I'm just drawing them. There's always a little bit of me there. So that's the kind of things that comics would allow a person to do.
Hmm. I was also really struck by Batman the Animated Series, and the Batman adventures growing up. It sounds like you and I hit comics at about the same time. Death of Superman, the original Batman movie with Michael Keaton, all of those
Yeah,
things were big for
that was the
me.
first that was the first film I saw in the cinema.
Oh,
Actually,
nice, nice, yeah.
it was a bit of a scary experience, but
Hmm.
for I mean I was 6 at the time, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think my mom always jokes like you were scared of the movie as a kid, and now you're obsessed with Batman. So
Yeah, yeah. Same, same. I remember covering my eyes in the theater. Um, so curious about, you mentioned Batman Adventures, but the any other influences on your style?
yeah, I mean, growing up in the 90s, we didn't have access. I know a lot of people growing up in the 90s who are now like comic creators or comic creators were very much influenced by the image
Mm,
explosion, but we didn't
hmm.
have that. The only tie to image that I had was Jim Lee through the X-Men stuff because when after getting started on Batman and the Death of Superman, I was also checking out X-Men was coming out in Egypt, surprisingly, because they're not as big as Superman and Batman and Spider-Man, and I was really attracted to the art style.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that was an early influence. I don't think it's something that stuck, but that was like an influence to create comics generally. Uh, from an artistic point of view, I'd say. Um, I mean, influence is always a hard question because I'm like a sponge. I always find
Hmm.
new artists, or not even new, as in like they haven't done any work before, but like discovering people that maybe have done work in the past, but I didn't know about them. So I'm always discovering new names and reading their work and looking at how they tell the story and how they do everything down to the brush stroke and trying to see what I can absorb from that into my style and my way of telling the story. But I would say that when I started making comics in 2014, I was 31 at the time, and I think at that point, two books that were a huge inspiration to me were the Matt Fraction David Aya Hawkeye
Hmm.
and,
Hmm.
uh, and Black Mirror by Scott Snyder and Jock and Francesco Francavilla. And the
Hmm.
reason for that is before that I was like doing fan art and art stuff, but I was doing it in a very meticulous, almost photorealistic style that wouldn't have worked for the kind of comics that I wanted to do. But I was kind of stuck in that mindset, and then I read these two books, and it was like a mind shift to me. Like you can do things in a completely different way that is more dynamic and more loose and the storytelling in these stories is phenomenal, especially Hawkeye. It's a masterclass when it comes to
Hmm.
storytelling and how you lay out the panels and lay out the page and how to keep the action going. I always have Hawkeye on my desk whenever I'm like stuck and need inspiration. I just flip through and see how they were telling the story and how I
Yeah.
can just to get the brain working. Um, So I'd say these were my primary influences when I started making comics. But obviously, as time went by, I started kind of expanding my artistic diet and looking for inspiration in other places. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that these were the primary influences, but I'm always looking at new stuff and trying to incorporate that or learn something from what I'm reading. Um, in terms of influences as well, I'm always interested in the careers of artists because I
Mm-hmm.
started making comics in my 30s. So I always considered myself as somebody who came to it late in the game. When you read about artists in general, you see that a lot of them started at the age of 19 or 17, very, very
Mm-hmm.
early on. And so I was always interested in the artists that had a late start, but also had a successful or a remarkable career in comics. Somebody like I think Darwin Cook started in his 30s or late 20s. Somebody like Terry Moore started in his 40s, I think. And they're phenomenal artists. I love their work, but I also kind of gives me hope that he can start late and still have a successful career, leave a remark there. So
Mm-hmm.
that's also in terms of influence. It's not just artistic. It's the progression. It could be the evolution of an artist. Somebody like Michael Noah, for instance. I've fascinated by how his art evolved over the years. So yeah, it's not just artistic inspiration. It's just because comics is not just about art. It's about a career. It's about evolution. It's about a lot of things, not just the art, not just what you draw. Is when you look at the career of somebody over a decade or several decades, and you see how they evolved. That's also something that I'm interested in learning about and knowing.
Yeah, yeah. And you've worked with a number of folks already, so I was going to ask about your collaboration with Kevin Smith and what that was
Yeah,
like with Quick Stops, which is currently in progress, I believe.
yeah, yeah. I did one issue of the first volume of Quick Stops, which came out in February, and
Hmm.
Quick Stops. This was one issue out of the. It was a four-issue run, and I did one issue. There was a different artist on every issue, and Quick Stops Volume Two is coming out in November, and this one I'm doing the whole run. I mean, as far as I know, four issues, so I'm doing the full story. Maybe they're gonna have other quick stop stories after mine concludes, but I'm doing a full story start to finish.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, it's been a dream come true, if I'm going to be honest. Uh, I've been a fan of Kevin as a filmmaker and as a person for decades now. I think the first film I watched was Mallrats in early 2000s, like
Hmm. Hmm.
2002 or 2003. Because again, Kevin's work wasn't getting theatrical releases in Egypt, like the big blockbusters that get coverage everywhere. But I've discovered his work, and it was mind blowing to me at the time that there's a movie there's a filmmaker that's making films about comic book fans, and the really focused on the comic book culture, which was something we have superhero films, but we don't have any films talking about the fans and the culture
Hmm.
back then. And I've been a fan since then. I think I know his talks by heart. I can recite them pretty much. So when this came along, he I think he put out a tweet in May 2022 saying that he's looking for artists, and I tweeted back with my work. And usually I don't expect much of these. Like I put my work there so that maybe somebody else sees it and hires me, but not the person who's asking for artists.
Uh-huh.
Be- Because he's worked with phenomenal artists in the past. I mean, and many of them are favorites: Mike Orred, Phil Hester, Joe Quesada. So he's worked with really big people, and I don't think that he's gonna hire me. But then it happened. I got a message from the editor saying that we'd like you to draw an issue. Which I said yes, of course.
Mhm.
Absolutely do. After Quick Stops 4 came out, I got another message from Kevin last Feb to say that he wants me to do the whole story of movie The Golden Calf for Quick Stops 2, and Kevin's been amazing to work with. It's like because I've worked with other indie writers in the past, and it's very casual with them. And I was surprised that it's very casual with him as well. I mean, we're passing messages. What do you think of this? How do you like this design?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's just he's been amazing to work with. I know there's a saying never meet your heroes, or never work with your heroes, but this definitely proves this saying wrong, because it's been amazing.
Wonderful,
Uh,
wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. Seems to be a cool guy. Very cool guy.
He is very, very, very cool. Uh, it's like working with a friend, really, and it's
Hmm.
the best kind of collaboration.
Yeah, yeah. So, curious about, on the one hand, where people can go to see your work, social media outlets and things like that, but also anything that creatively you're thinking about as next steps or that might be currently in progress that you're working on that you could talk about.
As forward, find me. I'm on all social media under the Ahmed Raafat. This is my handle, so find me on Twitter while it lasts. I'm not calling it X. It's still
Mhm.
Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Threads, I'm on Instagram. So that's where people can find me and see what's going on with my work artistically. I've got Quick Stops 2 coming out starting next month. Uh,
Mhm.
and then after that, I've got a series that I'm going to be working on with a writer called Dwayne Murray. That should, I think it comes out in 2025. By the time I've finished the art takes a long time to do.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So that's what's coming up next. And yeah, I mean, the social media is the best place to find out what I'm up to. I've thought about doing a newsletter, but I don't want to. Didn't feel like sending people like loads of people a message about how what I'm doing, and like talking a lot. I just didn't feel like myself doing that. Uh, um, and yeah, that's what's up with me.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Ahmed, thank you for taking some time to talk with me. Thank you for showing off your action figure collection as
There's there's
well.
there's more, and they're everywhere.
Love it.
They're everywhere. It's an addiction that I cannot stop myself from. I can't stop myself from buying action figures.
It's part of the fandom, for sure.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, glad to talk with you anytime about projects that are going on, and thanks so much for taking some time to talk with me.
Thank you for having me again, and
Yeah,
it's been a lovely chat.
yeah, yeah. Great to chat with you as well. Thanks so much.